Then we have Edward Hopper. Now, Hopper is the best known American realist of the interwar period. And he once said that the man's the work. Something doesn't come out of nothing. So, this offers us a clue to interpreting the work of an artist who was not only intensely private, but who made solitude and introspection really an important theme of his art. His wife, Jo, by the way, will be his only model. So anytime you see a female in any of Hopper's paintings, it is always his wife. He will also make 3 trips to Europe between 1906 and 1910. And by Europe, we mean France and more specifically Paris. And he's doing these more classical, more impressionist sort of images while he's there. This is a study of Notre Dame, for example. So again, very familiar with the classics. Now let's go and look at some of his actual work. And we start with probably his most famous work, Nighthawk. Or Nighthawk. There we go. So this is one of the best known images of the 20th century. The painting itself depicts an all-night diner in which 3 customers are all lost in their own thoughts and yet have congregated together. Now, his understanding of the expressive possibility of light is really important here, giving the painting a sense of beauty or a slight sense of disturbing reality. So, to start out, in the 1940s, fluorescent lights had only just come into existence, and right now we're seeing this eerie glow of these early fluorescent lights, this blue-green glow that we always get from them, even today. And it's like a beacon on the dark street corner. It's attracting us. We want to look at it. We want to enter it. But yet we run into a serious problem here. How do we get in? There's no door at the corner. There's no door on this side and no door over here. In fact, it's more of a fish tank. You would expect to see a bunch of fish floating around here, not a bunch of people. So, why do we have a fish tank? Because he wants us to simply observe what's going on. He's eliminated any reference to an entrance, and the viewer drawn to the light is shut out. This is more a scene from a zoo, or an aquarium as it were, than it is a scene of actual life. But yet, let's go a little bit further. Our characters are all anonymous, and they're completely uncommunicative. None of them are interacting with each other. These night owls seem as separate and remote from the viewer as they are from one another. Here we see a man with a woman in red. The woman in red is probably going to be a prostitute or some form of woman of the night. Red is usually the color for that, going way back to the Renaissance and earlier. The man doesn't seem to have any connection with her. If these were lovers or something like that, you would expect them to maybe hold hands or look at each other or have some connection, but instead these are just, it would almost be 2 people that happen to be sitting next to each other. Her playing with a piece of paper, him smoking a cigarette, and they both have their coffee cup next to them. If we go over to the other side, the guy whose back is turned to us, he's not even communicating with us, and he's in no way communicating with the couple that we just looked at. They're all completely independent, and you notice there's nothing good going on here. Now, when we look at the piece overall, when you think of some place that you would go at 2 in the morning, there are only 2 reasons to be out at, for example, a George Webb or an all-night diner of some form at 2 in the morning. First of all, you are troubled. And these people are drinking coffee. You don't drink coffee at 2 in the morning unless you're working, unless you're troubled. Or secondly, you go out for pancakes, because pancakes are delicious any time of day. But they're not eating pancakes. No, this place smells of desperation. So, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with this overarching sense of isolation. This is actually created during the wartime. Many believe that that the disconnect between the patrons and the waiter, as well as between the people inside and the external world, represent these feelings that Americans had during this period of loneliness, especially during the war. Imagine being one of these men during the war. The only reason to be home in 1942 is because you weren't accepted into the military. You have flat feet, you're too short, you haven't yet become Captain America, whatever the situation might be. So they're here, they're isolated, they're feeling that sense of shame because their flat feet or whatever else is stopping them from getting into the military. Maybe they're too old. Maybe they're up to no good. We don't know. Now, Hopper denied that he purposely infused this or any other of his paintings with symbols of human isolation and emptiness. But he acknowledged that in Nighthawks, he unconsciously, probably, was painting the loneliness of a large city. Because when you look at it, apart from this fish tank of the diner, there is nothing else. There is not a sign of human existence. This is 4 a.m. at its greatest, but it goes one step further because this should remind you of another piece that you've seen in the past. Night Cafe. So, when we look at Van Gogh, we have the same eerie yellow, green, sickly light. We have the same people who are isolated from one another. We even have in the background of the painting by Van Gogh a couple sitting on the same side, not really interacting with one another, the woman in a shade of red. We have a lot of different ideas. And remember, Van Gogh's painting is about this horrible place, this place that can ruin oneself, where one can go mad or commit a crime. And then we see Nighthawk, which is so incredibly similar. Look at the two. Now, one is Van Gogh trying to capture this mania and the sickness of this place by using that yellow-green light, and yet we see the same thing in Hopper, and we're told, oh, it's only loneliness. But it could be a lot more. Could be that idea that you're never really in a good place if you're out and about at 2 to 4 in the morning at these cafes. There's a lot going on. This could be deeply psychological. This could be Hopper telling us about his life, that he feels isolated, that he feels manic and maybe mentally sort of sickly, the same way that we would expect of Van Gogh at the same time with Night Cafe. So a lot of really interesting parallels between these two pieces. And by the way, Hopper would have been familiar with Van Gogh's work because A, it's pretty common at the time, and B, he's been to Europe, he's been to Paris, he's probably seen this piece or some reproduction of it.